I see my name in shining lights. Yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host Shalom Klein has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success. Let's get down to business.
And indeed, we're all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. And while you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you will not want to miss. And I'm so excited to be joined by the one and only Courtney Lynch, who recently, together with a colleague, Angie Morgan, wrote Bet on You, How to Win with Risk. And I'm super excited to talk about all of the insights that have been gathered over a period of time. But Courtney, I'd love to get started with the story behind the book and behind your collaboration with Angie. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely, Shalom. Thanks so much for having me on. It's so great to be a part of your show. And I think one thing that's interesting about our backgrounds, we both have it in common, is I'm a veteran. So I'm a nerd and a geek for leadership. And I learned leadership as a United States Marine. And I have been privileged to be working with companies for the last 18 years to help them develop leaders. And Angie and I decided to write on the topic of risk because we saw it as an area where we could really support people with their own development. When you can win with risk, you can achieve so much more. And I think the stronger you're able to be yourself, right? When you're betting on yourself, you become stronger for others. And so our backstory is we learned to lead in the military, and we spent about 2 decades advising the world's best businesses on how to develop leaders. And risk is a big part of that.
That's huge. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And I thank you for your service to both of you, which is incredible. I know you spent 9 years in the Marine Corps. You've managed a top-notch software sales team and practiced at one of the nation's leading law firms. So let's jump right into risk. Why are you so focused on risk, and what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've seen?
What's interesting, I think all of us seek thriving lives, right? I meet so many great leaders, so many great people in the world in which I work, and we all want to have a thriving life. Now, we define that perhaps a bit differently, yet I think no matter how we define a thriving life, we have to take risks to get there. And so a couple of the key misconceptions that we work to hit head on in our book, Bet on You, are one, that risk is the opposite of reward, right? We always hear risk versus reward. And in reality, rather than believe that risk is the opposite of reward, I think we have to recognize that risk is the path to reward. So you have to take steps that feel risky to actually realize the rewards that matter to you. Another common misconception is that risk is a big leap, right? I think our society really celebrates those sudden dramatic changes. Shows like 90 Day Fiancé are popular, and we tell people to rip the Band-Aid off or quit your job, change your life. And I found through the years of working with pretty phenomenal leaders that those bold, jarring, kind of out of nowhere risk-taking moves, they often lead to less than best outcomes. And we believe and talk about in our book, making risk something that's steady and consistent in your life, right? You're mindful, you're intentional, and you're stepping towards risk with a really intentional mindset around the steps that certainly there are no guarantees, but make sense to what matters to you. So those are just a couple of them. I think the last one, though, is we think we can actually avoid risk-taking, right? We all talk about mitigating risk, but I think we have to look at risk as taking action in the face of uncertainty. And when you define it that way, risk is everywhere. And so it's a skill set, managing and leveraging and winning with risk, that we need to pay attention to.
Indeed, risk is everywhere. And certainly from your time in the military, certainly you've understood the elements of risk. And you talk in your book, again, it's called Bet on You, How to Win with Risk. I know it just came out back in April. you talk about how wargaming is important when you're dealing with fear. What do you mean by that?
I think it's just really important to understand what's behind your fears, right? And when we can war game a bit, when we can think through scenarios, when we can really understand what we're afraid of, that allows us to identify what's holding us back. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe we're limited in resources. Maybe we're afraid of mistakes and failures. Maybe we lack an ability to prioritize, right? There's lots of different reasons, but the more we war game and think through the scenarios and really get to the root of our fears, the more we're able to bet on ourselves and rewrite some narratives and move forward. One of the themes that's really coming across to readers of the book is the fact that fear kills more dreams than failure ever will. And really understanding our fears actually gives us the motivation to step forward in the face of them and beyond them.
Absolutely. And something that you talk about in the book, which I found fascinating, is about perfectionism. And it's interesting, both you and I, certainly in the military, you talk about, rehearsals, you talk about preparing for any situation and so on. But one of the things that I know I've had many conversations with those that serve under me as well as my leaders is it is okay to take risks. It is okay at times to fail. So how does perfectionism and I think sometimes that culture that exists, especially in large companies, but even in entrepreneurship, everybody wants to be that perfect shining example of business success. How does that limit us from taking risks that actually will allow us to succeed in a greater level?
No, it's such a great question. I appreciate you asking it because I think there's a healthy dose of us out there that have challenges with perfectionism, right? And I think perfectionism ultimately can have a chill on you stepping towards what matters most to you because you perceive that opportunity to fail is way too high. Yet I think if we pause for a second and we all take a look at our own lives, I don't know about you, but I've certainly learned more lessons through failure and through some of those valley moments rather than those awesome, and I still want to seek them mountaintop moments, right? I love to achieve success. Yet a lot of times what makes me even stronger and better for the next goal that matters or the next contribution that I want to make is actually inspecting my failures and having a real understanding that failure isn't something to be afraid of. It's a very valuable learning experience. And I think when we're perfectionists, we have a chill on some of that deep learning that comes from stepping a little too far or making that misstep. We're human. The only thing that's certain is we are going to make some mistakes, but we build such skill in overcoming them and moving through them that I just want to fail fast now and see the signs and be very self-aware versus prevent failure, because that's impossible when you're doing big things that matter to you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Lots of lessons there. And I know, again, Courtney, you and Angie, you both, obviously through your time in the Marines, you've really taken that masterclass in how to take risks, and now you're sharing it both through your multi-million-dollar leading consulting firm called LeadStar that you came together in 2004, but now, of course, with this fantastic read, which I think is absolutely awesome. Bet on You: How to Win with Risk, which is great. So what's the big takeaway that as our listeners go into the week ahead that you want them to put into action? What are some of the action items, aside from picking up a copy of the book, but more on that in just a moment, that you want people to perhaps step forward and will allow them to be a better entrepreneur?
I think the biggest takeaway, and having worked with an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur, is that we are far more capable at times than we believe. And I rarely meet leaders that aren't capable of achieving their dreams, but I often meet leaders that are afraid to take risk. And so our advice is keep stepping, right? To really, truly dream it, own it, take it. And, you have to do the work. We talk about that. You need to build a safety net, right? We thought it would be very irresponsible to write a book about risk and not talk about how you can stay safe. Yet we talk about practical guidance, choosing guides, recognizing when you're winning, and truly, truly understanding what matters most to you, and recognizing that risk is all around us. And so rather than try to avoid it, how do you choose it much more intentionally? And when you start to choose risks intentionally, you actually start to achieve greater success, greater results, and I believe get in a position to contribute greater value to others and certainly the communities and teams you're a part of.
Well, that's a good takeaway if there ever was one. But certainly, I want to make sure our listeners get a hold of you and your team, as well as, of course, pick up a copy of the book. How can we reach you, and where can we find this fantastic read?
Well, Bet on You is available everywhere books are sold. It also comes with an awesome online free digital companion where you make your own risk manifesto. So just search up Bet on You, and you can learn more about our firm Leadstar at leadstar.us. So that's Leadstar, LEADSTAR.us.
Well, thank you so much, Courtney Lynch, for joining us. I look forward to having you back on to learn more about those leadership lessons, learn a little bit more about risk. But we've got to squeeze in a quick break here and get down to business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. You can find out more on my website, get a sneak peek of who's going to be on next week on the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. The website is shalomklein.com. And of course, you can search for Get Down to Business on your favorite podcast app. Quick break, more when we return in just a moment. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.